Hello, and welcome to the podcast Green Business with Impact. Today, we are going to have a focus on the connection between working seriously with sustainability in your company and recruitment and that whole talent part. Because this is one of the most consistent results I've seen amongst these many companies that I've worked with, chatted with, read about, that really seriously work on with sustainability in their business. It is that it has a huge, either intended or just simply unintended value in terms of how easy it becomes to attract people and how happy and satisfied employees are with working there. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation and hear that from a real professional in that space of attracting talent. So with us today, I have Alan Furley, who's the co-founder and CEO of ISL Talent, which is a British recruitment company that specializes in working with startups that are typically in that range of 10 to 15 people and in a scale-up mode. And Alan has been working with recruitment for the last 20 years. And last year alone, you guys helped 15 of these startups or scale-ups secure the right people for their growth. So clearly, well-experienced guy. So Alan, thank you so much for being on and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jasper. Really pleased to be along. I woke up this morning really excited to talk about that intersection between sustainability, very much your world and what this is all about, and then talent, my world. I think maybe it's felt important for a while now, but as we kind of come into 2024, it feels that hopefully sustainability is no longer a buzzword or a nice to have, and that's across all aspects of business, but definitely with the people that we know are so key to success. So yeah. Excited to share my thoughts.
Great. Okay, well, I'd like to sort of kick it off by asking a fairly sort of open question, but how important is the right team to a business success in today's world?
I think if you just flip that question round and say, do you think that the wrong team is going to destroy a business, then most people would nod their head pretty quickly. So yeah, hopefully it demonstrates that it's crucially important. So there's so much data, particularly in the startup world, that I live and breathe around the impact of the right team. If a business is going out looking for investment, particularly if they're an early, pre-seed or seed stage business, or they're looking to scale, one of the key things they're going to be asked is their plans to bring in the right people and the quality of the people they have today. I think, and that extends across all businesses. I think high performing teams increase profitability. Having diverse talent in your business builds the strongest businesses and really helps that innovation flourish as well. And we know that innovation is so much at the heart of the whole movement around sustainable businesses. So yeah, I think you can link them pretty strongly in terms of the right people builds the best businesses and really maximizes the impact in whatever sector that might be.
Yeah. And I mean, with this, I think everybody can agree that competition has just grown significantly harder over the last, couple of years, with COVID sort of breaking down that barrier of geography, not entirely, but at least doing something to it. So all of a sudden, people feel they can compete in a completely different area than they used to. And then with everything related to, well, on the backside of COVID and with the war on supply chain issues and prices and all of that. So very often people find competition is just growing. So I'm guessing that. I mean, could you feel that as well? That this desire or request for having these 18 players do you feel that's growing as well?
I think there's definitely recognition, particularly the last 12 months, that it's not simply about going from a headcount of 10 to 20 or 20 to 50 and using that as a metric for success. And I think part of that is realizing that if you get those A players, however that's defined for your business, and it definitely should be different for one business than another, they can have a real oversized impact. So being keen to hold out and find the 3 people that are right for you versus putting 10 heads in place and assuming that you'll get to the same result is, it's definitely something that people are more conscious of. Partly the pressure on capital within businesses means you're looking to unlock more from the talent you have. Therefore, you want to focus on those A-grade talent. I think also as you mentioned, we're all working much more virtually and remotely now. So in the war for talent, that's been long used as a phrase that businesses need to be aware of. Clearly, kind of where you are based as a company, if there even is a base, is no longer such a factor. And so I think that does mean that I'm based in Bristol. We work with companies local to me, work with companies in London, internationally, places down in Cornwall as well. And on one level, it means the business in Cornwall, which doesn't have a strong tech population, can attract people from elsewhere, from London, from Scotland, from Denmark. But the flip side of that is, of course, the people that are in Cornwall that they previously would have been able to access without that competition, they now have everybody from London to Copenhagen to Silicon Valley.
Exactly.
And the reward is clearly quite different then with some of the business models. So I think that's something that a lot of people have had to work through, and perhaps are still trying to work out exactly where they stand on both their talent pool, but also how they really are clear on the offering to attract the best talent to their business.
And then, I think it's interesting because remote has obviously been one of these, I guess you could say, benefits that you can add, right? Whereas higher purpose, which is very much where I come from, right? That this feeling that now we are changing the company to become part of the solution. We are not just part of the problem. The reason why the weather gets more and more wicked, or whatever it is that you are connected to. But how do you see that sort of the balance, and what are the sort of top things that, besides the traditional stuff like what's the job, what's the salary, and so what are these sort of additional, where will you see higher purpose and remote and stuff, where do they fit in, and what's top 3, top 5 that the talent is talking about when you engage with them?
I think salary and job title are cornerstones of what someone looks for in a job, and that hasn't changed. But I think those things are largely acknowledged as hygiene factors. So things that you cannot be so far off the mark that you're not aligned with the market. Particularly the last 2 years, I think there's been many more candidates coming to us. Quite often senior candidates, sometimes those that are entering the workforce. And of course, they have a reality in their finances. Someone may not be able to go from earning 150,000 to earning 50,000, but people are thinking, I think, much more intentionally about where they're spending their time, and work is, a huge part of that. So if I think about, the last 5 or 10 C-level candidates that have come to me asking for advice and being a bit of a sounding board on their next career steps, I'm definitely not saying that all 10 of them would be saying, I want to work in a sustainable industry, but it is, for a lot of them, much higher in their list of priorities. And I think so that kind of purpose, and people not wanting to head into London 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and earn a nice salary, but not feel that they're making an impact. That may be their own personal pressure. Maybe it's from the experiences they have waking up to the weather we face now. Maybe it's their peers, their children. There's so many influences there in a very positive way that can help shape people's thinking. But 100%, I think that those things, the mission, the vision, the values that have always been a big part of attracting the best talent, we're seeing now for businesses that are in this space of sustainability and climate tech, and really strongly can speak to the problems they're trying to solve. There's a huge opportunity there to have a really strong asset in that war for talent that is in the same category, i.e., purpose, as many other businesses, but is clearly much stronger for them and at the core of what they're doing as a business and as a leadership.
Yeah, because we all want to have good questions when the discussion come up, right? Whether it's our kid who is, we have theme week at school. What are you, by the way, doing, right? Or if it's at, now we're at the dinner party and the discussion come in, right? And then being able to actually share a positive story rather than, I hope they're not going to ask me. So I guess we're all looking to contribute to some of the bigger things that are also on the headlines all the time. So
yeah, and
it makes sense.
when we're working with candidates and we get them to the point of accepting an offer, then don't get me wrong, largely that crunch point is brilliant news. Jasper would love to offer you a job to work with this company, and they've agreed to offer you 50,000 or 100,000. So at that point, you probably are talking about the salary and the reward and clarifying some of the details. But if you went back to the start of the process and what really attracted that candidate who ends up accepting the offer and celebrating the extra £5,000 or £10,000 salary they might have got, the thing that brought them into that process is much more likely to be the intrinsic motivators. And a big part of that, I think, is
spending the time, as you say, on the right kind of things. Yeah, it got to make sense, right?
Yeah, and I think if I think about my first years in recruitment, then the model was very much you talk to a business, you put an advert out, it's anonymous, it's pretty generic, and looking back now, pretty kind of bland and boring and engaging.
Yeah.
Where we are now, most of the startups we work with, they work with us over a 3, 6, 12 or 18 month period. And as part of the way we work with them, we're retained across a number of roles. And there's a commercial benefit to that and commitment. But one of the things that's relevant here, perhaps to share, is that we can go out there with the company's brand and their story. And for some of we don't by any means focus within sustainable businesses or climate as a space, but that's increasingly a part of our portfolio. And we see a marked difference in if we're going to market and talking about the name of the business, and as part of that can share their mission and their purpose, the engagement we get from approaching people and from people coming back to our advertising and our marketing campaigns is significantly different compared to the businesses that don't have that strong story to tell in this area.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't know, I'm curious to hear if you have the same experience, but from where I stand, I can see that this is not just for so-called green tech or environmental companies. It could be anything. We produce shoes or office desks or whatever, but we do that in a different way than, again, trying not to be part of the problem, but be part of the solution. So do you see that as well, or is it more clearly defined to the traditional green tech or sectors?
I think there is a difference, but I don't think it's the haves and the have-nots. So we worked with a business in Bristol a while back, a business called Kelpie, and they are looking to use seaweed and work with the material to transform it into a single-use plastic replacement. Now, if you looked at the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, they could quite clearly point to at least 2 of those and show that what they're doing has that direct link. So, of course, it's easier for that business from the outset to bring that story to life. But I think, as you mentioned, whatever business you're in, whether it's making TVs or trying to be really innovative in terms of, changing one material to replace something we know is clearly harming the planet, I think you've got the opportunity to talk more broadly about what you're doing within sustainable initiatives. And so it may be easier for a business like Kelpie to have that strong hook out there, but I think there's a need across all businesses to think about how they're telling the story around sustainability and how it impacts their business. And of course, it's not simply storytelling. It can't be fiction. It needs to be backed up with the action and the reality. And clearly that's where, a lot of businesses will struggle, but everybody recognizes there's something here they can do that can make a serious difference, both in terms of the big purpose and, helping the planet, but also bringing great talent into their business and reacting to it being a lot more front of mind for what people are asking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's shift gear a bit and then talk a bit more about, how do you actually do this, right? Because clearly there is a need for A players, and there's also clearly some sort of link, and it's a growing influence that this higher purpose, a positive impact somehow plays on the candidates. But so how do you go about attracting A players when you are such a force for good company? And how do you keep them, by the way? Not almost probably even more important. So how do you attract them, and how do you get to keep them?
I think the principles are the same, no matter what business you're in and what sector you're in. So we have an aptly named talent methodology that we use with our clients. And so to touch on that briefly and then to come kind of back to your question. So that has 6 pillars, TALENT. So the T is around the talent planning, the A around the attraction, the L is locating, E is evaluating, typically the interviews. And then once people are in, you've got N for nurturing that talent, and then T for the team retention. So whatever business I'm in, I need to cover those bases. I need to think through what I'm looking for, attract and assess the right people, and then retain them as well. I think with businesses in this sector, where they have the opportunity to maximize the impact and they have much stronger assets to talk about is in the A and the L. So partly the attracting is around storytelling. So if I'm a business that's clearly got sustainability at my core, I can bring that to life through my career site when I'm going out there and talking about what we're doing as a business and everything that's geared around that employer brand and being able to attract people, not simply for salary and job title and not because of the roles and responsibilities in the job description, but because there's clearly that what's in it for them appeal. And then the L part, the locating, I think is going to be a lot easier if you're in this space. So that locating, it may be engaging with a recruitment company like us who will go and headhunt. It may be going out there and networking and leveraging your network of customers, suppliers, advisors. So whichever of those sort of pillars within the L you choose, the ability to be proactive and reach out to the best talent, that's what the reality is, that if we're recruiting for a head of data science, one of our clients, then, with 30 minutes training, you could jump onto LinkedIn and find exactly the same people that I could. So that locating is the same process for both of us. But if I can talk about sustainability, which won't appeal to everybody, but for many people will be the hook that means if they've got 10 messages in their inbox that day or 15 people approaching them on LinkedIn, if I'm really transparent around the story, because I've worked on that attracting pillar, my ability to locate and also, I suppose, engage and have a conversation with them is much more. So I run them through the same process, but I'm able to win on those 2 key pillars, I think, is the ones that I highlight.
Yeah. Okay. So just to recap, if I get it correctly, so if here I am, let me say I'm the CEO of a company, we are 20 people and we want to, we need more heads as part of our growth trajectory, whether it's, as sort of aggressive as most of the ones you have, or more like, well, we just need a couple more people, but it's about defining what we really need and then attracting, right? What's the story? What's the narrative? How do we go, as you say, beyond that sort of old fashioned way of just defining and describing the job, but actually creating something inspiring and attracting. And then it's a whole location part. How do you go out and find them? How do you match them? That's where the real effort is. And then the rest is more like traditional hiring processes. Is that, did I hear you correctly? Is that sort of the model that will be what people need to do?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, once you've then, been clear on your story and gone out there and got the people into your funnel, so to speak, because I think a lot of recruitment you could align to sales and marketing, then the things you're doing to assess them should be pretty consistent. You need to define what an A player is for your business versus your neighbour's business. But the way that you assess those, the things that matter, that focus on the skills and what they're doing in the role rather than the logo of where they worked before and where they went to school, whatever business you're in, those would be bad things to rely on to try and find the A players versus thinking about, like you say, because you've put the effort into that definition and perhaps been guided through that by someone like myself, it hopefully makes that assessment much more. And I think that's where probably that sustainability aspect doesn't really come into that, because there's a danger you could focus too much on the fact that someone wants to work in that sector and overlook the things that have always been important as to, excuse me, can they actually do the job? And, I think they're going to make the impact we're looking for. And, and you'll need to decide yourself where you are on the spectrum. But clearly, if you focus too much on the fact that they want to do this, rather than they've got the capabilities to do this, you find you've got a business of people that are aligned on your mission, but unfortunately don't have the capabilities to grow the business as you want it.
I think this is a really crucial part because, several of the people I work with, they as a CEO or founder or owner or whatever they call themselves, are really committed to see the change, in a combination of them wanting it at a personal level and strategically thinking this is the future proofing, this is where our growth trajectory is. So I think it's a crucial point you touched upon there, that don't get carried away by that strong alignment to the cause without remembering that you also perhaps need to just take one step back, or have someone like you, Alan, on their side or something to help say, oh, okay, let's also be really, really critical to whether or not they're actually strong enough on all the different things you need to be good at, not just, both in personal style and competences and experience and all of that. So I think that seems like a really important thing that I could see some of my clients, might potentially fall into that trap, myself included, by the way, because of, when your business is so anchored in a higher purpose. I think it's easy to be blinded slightly, at least.
Yeah, and I think that can come into the retention piece that you touched on. So we've, over the last couple of years, done some research and asked 500 candidates who had left a role in the previous 4 months, what were the key factors? And the 3 C's is a nice way to remember it. So compensation, career progression, and culture. So money matters, but over the 3 times we've run the survey, it's always been number 3 rather than the top 2. And compensation and career progression have flipped a little bit, but they're not meaningfully different. So I think that clearly a business that's in this space needs to be able to articulate their growth plans. And that doesn't necessarily need to be about doubling the headcount, but how they're going to demonstrate that personal development to the individual, because that's massively important to keep the best talent. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is the culture. So I think most people would say that culture is important, but there is a danger that you could have a business that says, great, we've got a really strong purpose, we're addressing goal number 13 of the SDGs, but has a toxic culture. And the reality is that business may bring people in, but quite quickly when they realize that it's a culture that they're not enjoying at all, and is really bad for them as an individual day by day, but also not somewhere they want to be longer term, then great news, you've recruited all these people, but you've got a retention problem, which means maybe it's good for a recruiter like me, but the reality is that I want to be working in businesses that can keep their people, because over time those are going to be the businesses that attract the best talent as well. So I think you can't overlook or assume that sustainability and your bigger sense of purpose and helping to solve climate emergency is going to solve every issue around people, and forget about the need to have a culture. And also for a lot of the businesses we work with, where maybe they're going from that founding team to starting to scale and bringing in people they don't know. It's one of the reasons why they come to us, because they want to diversify their network and access different talent pools. But they need to recognize that culture probably doesn't change fundamentally from the first year to the third year, but it needs to adapt and evolve. And they do as an organization, so that they can still retain the talent they're bringing in.
So what do you see? What are sort of what do they do to create that strong culture, or to fix it if it's, gone slightly off rail? What are some of the things that you see that might inspire some of the listeners here to either what to look for or what to focus on?
I think we could probably do a whole podcast or a series of them on culture, because it's such a huge topic. And one of the hopefully simple models that can be quite practical to think about is stolen from a book written by Daniel Pink, a book called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates People. And he talks about 3 things. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, about not being micromanaged and being free to maximize the impact of my skills within a business. Mastery comes back to that personal development and touches on progression. So am I getting better at what I'm doing and learning as I go? And then purpose, whether it's a purpose with a capital P, a climate tech business, or maybe for a startup in a different sector, a smaller P, and simply having the mechanisms to give their team feedback around the impact of what they're doing, so they understand that they've done something with their time that day. And so there's lots of feedback on that. So, and if I think about the thousands of candidates that I've spoken to over the years and that my team talk to on a regular basis, and ask them that key question when they come to us and say, I'm looking for something new. Why is it you're looking to leave your current employer? Then sometimes they say, I'm underpaid, or I want a bigger job title. But a lot of the times you could listen to what they're saying and bring it into one of those three areas: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I'm being micromanaged. I don't feel I'm learning, or I don't really give a damn about what I'm doing. And so, if I was running a business, and it's definitely how I think about it with my business, with my team, is, am I covering something in autonomy, an adult to adult environment? Am I showing to people that they are progressing, whatever that looks like to them as an individual? And clearly having a conversation with them as an individual is key. And then, do we have the right feedback loops and the right stories within our business that demonstrate the purpose behind what we're doing, either at a big top level or at an individual level, that they get that sense of purpose? And I think if you covered those, and it's an evolving journey rather than a finite plan, you'd be covering a lot of the issues that stop retention, but also then allow you to really get the most from the people. Because and I suppose the final point is that there's no point retaining people who aren't motivated. So if you go back to what motivates people, and either they realize that they're motivated by things you can't offer, and that's probably a good thing, although it may not feel it at the point they're moving on, or hopefully you can keep the people that are right for you rather than everybody, and really maximize the impact of those because you've covered those three areas.
Yeah. And I think, one of the places where when you really integrate sustainability into the core of what you do, so, becoming that kind of force for good company, then all of a sudden, that part about the purpose, at least for those who are fit for that purpose, becomes so much stronger. And as you say, it's not just something like we have the narrative in place, we have the story. It's like, it's how we do. And we are on a journey to just get better and better at it. So basically, the more products or services we sell, the more of this impact, whatever that is, if it's a climate discussion or a biodiversity or a social side, doesn't really matter. But whatever it is that you've sort of picked as, this is the kind of problem that we want to solve, then because it's not like business as usual, and then we have a lot of efforts around this, it's more like we're changing business to become the tool to fix the problem. So the more we do, the more you get in. And that's where I think that's why we see, as I said in the beginning, that it's the most consistent value or result that I've seen across these hundreds and hundreds of companies. It really is that. And I think now that you mentioned these three, that because we're changing the way we do, it also means it's a big innovation thing. So there's a lot of personal growth and development, and the purpose just keeps growing. And then it actually boils down to just a matter of autonomy. And a lot of this, if you are to succeed on such a transition journey, you need to set it a bit free, because otherwise you won't really be able to achieve the kind of results that you need. So perhaps that's actually why we have this very, very clear pattern that those who really engage, they also get teams that are just really happy to be there, and they are able to attract people as kind of like, okay, you're ready to travel so far for being part of this journey, or you're ready to leave this kind of job to come here, and I'm not even, I can't even match your salary. So perhaps that's actually part of the reason why, and why it works best for those who do go. It's a wholehearted thing, right? It's not just something we do on the side. It's how we do. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about corporates, and my world's very much the startups, and if I think about it, there's probably two reasons for that. So I think that those startups, those scale ups, they are a big part of job creation compared to maybe those bigger businesses. So there's clearly a benefit there in recruiting with those businesses, because they're creating jobs rather than sort of remaining static. Innovation, the energy I get if I'm talking to a founder of one of our clients and the ambition they've got to grow something, I'm clearly excited because I think I can play a part in that, but also because I know it's going to make a difference when I'm going to talking to people because of that innovation. And we work across, tech startups broadly rather than being focused on a sector. So everything from fintech to femtech. But what's been pleasing is that over the last couple of years, funding drives a lot of the hiring, and that's clearly been up and then down, and who knows where it'll be for 2024. But because the funding is going to the businesses that have hopes for innovation, then so much more of that is within climate, and and that's clearly a good thing for all of us. Where perhaps it's not easy to go out there and raise within any business, but if you're going out there to bring capital in your business, to bring talent into your business, then and innovation is at the core of that, then both in terms of the fundraising and the bringing people in, that's a really strong theme you can on, which hopefully will get your audience nodding their head that they have that in their belt to be able to, to maximize the impact of their business and really maximize the innovation that is there as a potential.
Yeah. I just want to touch on one thing that I thought about a little early on when you mentioned, I think it was probably the three things about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. But let's just, there seems to be a lot of stories around quiet quitting. And I don't know how much of this is stories and how much is reality. But I remember when I started reading about it, I was kind of thinking, again, back to this purpose, right? If that you can fix people that are unengaged, and you also see these, surveys from time to time telling of hugely high percentages of people are unengaged in their work, where all the time I was kind of thinking, well, just move into a green transition and become sort of a purposeful driven company, and that will disappear. Are you seeing the same? And how big is this quiet quitting? Is it mainly a thing in the media and the full social media pages and stuff, or is it the real deal?
I think it's probably a bit of both. So a lot of these terms are probably developed by a researcher somewhere and brought to life and have a strong PR theme to it. But they are grounded in reality. I suppose on one level, if someone's quiet quitting, maybe they're not reaching out to a recruitment company, they're sitting there phoning it in each day. But there's no doubt that a lot of people are thinking around, well, am I engaged and motivated? And you're right, the data is pretty damning across a lot of the UK, US and Europe on the amount of people that are truly engaged by their work. So I think for some that does cause them to shift entirely their focus. I think one of the other things that comes to mind is that we've seen more candidates coming to us and saying, okay, fine, for whatever reasons, then the job I'm doing, is not exactly in that sweet spot of what I'm good at, what I enjoy, what the world needs, but I am able to get that through other ways. Maybe it's through mentoring, maybe doing some fractional or part-time work. I think that going back to your comments on the remote working side of things, that's not the same as flexible working per se. It's a subset of it, and it doesn't mean that suddenly everybody wants to work part-time. But I think from both a client point of view, being more comfortable not having a team in the office 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, and from a candidate point of view, thinking what are they doing with their time, whether it's 10 hours a week, 50 hours a week, or 100 hours a week of work, and how can they at least have a portion of that, even if it's not 100%, that they can have that strong sense of purpose from. And for a lot of people, that thinking around sustainability. So I think that's the other part of it as well, is that it's not a all or nothing, and maybe for some people it's a first step is working with an accelerator or engaging with founders locally to you who are building this space and learning from that. Is it the thing that's giving you the energy that then you take that leap of faith and and make that step into, or is there some other way that you get that sense of purpose from what you're doing?
Yeah, makes good sense. Good advice. Okay, I like to I think when you're sitting out there and thinking, okay, I need to attract these kind of A players, there are different tools in that box, right? We've been touching upon some of them, but just sort of wanted to conclude a bit. In your experience, how would you sort of rate sustainability compared to other tools that you could use to become, a bit of a magnet for talent? How powerful a tool would you say sustainability is compared to what else is out there?
I'm not too sure is the honest answer. So as much as I'd like to be able to say it's the number one thing and it's the only
Oh, no.
yeah, that would be wrong. So there's no doubt it's an increasingly important tool for people, and different businesses will have a different ability to leverage that tool. I think it's linking back into some of the earlier points. It's got to be part of the offering, and a lot of how I would drive that if I'm running a business around sustainability is I may be thinking around the talent I need to bring in. I'd probably start with my existing team, and I'd go and talk to them and understand how strong a link they see between what they're doing day to day and what the world needs. Whether it's really clear from our mission or whether it's a little bit fuzzy, talking to people around you is a good way to get a better understanding and make sure it's not all being driven by you. And I'm 45 now, worked within recruitment for loads and loads of years and run my own business for a number of years. And so I guess I'm from an era where this issue of sustainability wasn't front of mind. Now, one of the things that I could be guilty of doing is therefore assuming it's not important. But whether it's my team talking about where we order lunch from and saying, well, the last place we ordered then seemed to have a lot of packaging and maybe we're not comfortable with that, and just something that hadn't necessarily come onto my radar previously, or walking down the street with my 9-year-old, he sees someone drop a crisp packet and I would have gone, that's messy. And he said, oh, they're harming the planet. And so I think it's about engaging with your network, whether it's friends, families, employees, but in this context of business, your team is a great starting point, and asking them what is important to them and being able to use the information that comes from that to know how to tell that story to others that like them. Assuming you've got the A players within your team and you want to add to them, then talk to those people. And going back to one of the things that I think is hugely important with any business is that diversity of talent, and not necessarily about what people look like, but the diversity of thought. Make sure it's not simply, as a leader, everything that's in your head and the limits that has and the bias that risks. Go and talk to your team and get a much broader sense of opinion and work out, should sustainability be the number one thing that you use as that hook to attract the talent, or does it simply need to be a really important part, but not something that you're relying on to change the game?
I think you touched on something really important there, remembering, as you say, who are you yourself, and how important is this higher purpose, this sustainability being something helping to solve some of the bigger problems in the world. How important is that to you? And if it's not that important, then remembering that it is for somebody else. so that don't in any sense, don't calibrate on yourself. You need to calibrate on more than yourself to make sure you get the right people. So I think that's really important to remember. And especially if you attract people that are from a very different age category than yourself, remember that things do change quite a lot in terms of what's important and what's up and down. So I think that's really a solid thing to remember as well. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I'd like to just end with a question that I know that you might even think, I don't even know what to say here, but I'll ask it anyway. And this is how I've been ending all the interviews in this season here. So from your chair, with the experience and knowledge you have and the way you work with companies and what you hear they say and what occupies their space and how they're doing and all of that, how would you assess the role of sustainability as to who will be the winners in the business world going forward?
I think there's still some pretty big question marks over that. And as I mentioned, we're seeing much more of our client base that are able to align to this space. And I would love that to grow more meaningfully. I think that, I was reading yesterday about the impact of interest rates and that changing the time basis on which people are looking for returns on investment. And I think within sustainability, there's clearly a need now. I think one of the challenges is there a return right now. And if people are finding the cost of money is higher today than it was a couple of years ago, how does that affect their view on something that may only produce a return in 10 years' time? So that's clearly one of the challenges that is there. Linking that back into the talent side of things, that's a thing to watch for as well, I think. So people, broadly speaking, want to be able to demonstrate purpose from what they're doing, but there is a risk factor to moving jobs. So one of the things that a business needs to work really hard on is that they're not simply say, come and join us, we're a force for good, but in 6 months' time, that person finds they don't have a job. And there's never any guarantees, whether you're in climate or health or even jumping on the AI bandwagon. There's a risk to any business, and that's part of what people love within startups and part of what people find really challenging within the startups and scale-ups we work with. So trying to answer your question, I think it's got a huge opportunity, but there's clearly some considerable challenges, both on the commercial narrative, but also across a few different areas as well.
Yeah. Well, like everything else, there's no sure thing. So so I think you're absolutely right, and let's see where things are going. My expectation will be that things are going to move and change fairly rapidly over the next 12 to 24 months or something, because so much is going on right now, and both in the world, and we can feel it, but also in terms of regulation and how the market is changing and everything. So I think this is going to be a discussion that we could fruitfully come back to a couple of times over the next 1 to 2 years, because I think the picture is changing. But and that's what it looks like.
The last thing that comes to mind is, I know from going out there and talking to founders that are building, I can see their passion sometimes, particularly when there's a really strong sense of innovation at their core. I found it can get quite lost in the nuances of what it is that's relevant to their sector. And so for any founder, but one in this space where they're trying to, almost by definition, innovate and do new things, and it's perhaps in areas that people are coming from other industries and aren't so familiar with, simplifying things and being really strong on the storytelling, that hopefully is a theme that's come across from a lot of what I've talked about today, is something that you really need to work on for all of your business, but when it comes to talent as well. So perhaps that's a final thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's a good place to end. So, Alan, thank you for showing up. And just thinking, if some of us listeners here are thinking, this was kind of interesting, that Alan Chat seems like a relevant guy, how do they best connect to you?
LinkedIn is where you'll find me, most obviously. So I'm not sure there's many Alan Furleys on LinkedIn, but find me there, and that's the best way. Drop me a message through. Like many of us, then, when it comes to sustainability, I am learning across many aspects. So I'd love to follow the conversation with people that are listening today and see where that leads to.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for coming, sharing your huge expertise and experience on this area. It's been, as expected, an interesting conversation. So thank you so much for that. And then just for your listeners, thank you for tuning in. And please remember to hit the subscribe button. And then also, if you feel like you heard something here that was interesting, I would be hugely grateful if you could just spend like 30 seconds thinking about one person in your network that you think might find this episode relevant, and then just tag them or share them with this message, so we can get more people to join and to listen and to learn from the great hosts, great people that I get on this podcast. So thank you all for listening, and Alan, thank you so much for being part of it.
Thanks so much. Really enjoyed.
Yeah.